Invalid. APC,
The voters' intention is clear.
It's clear now.
PDP.
Keep it aside.
PDP don't go far.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us and continuing coverage of the Kogi Biosphere election. Where else to be other than here, where we're giving you all the details that you need to know, especially when you are not able to see anything. If you are in Biosphere or Kogi, because it's late in the day now, but you will still have our eyes out there for you. Interesting scenario playing.
Yeah,
Now, some of the images that we've just shown now, some of the activities earlier in the day. Of course, much of it in Biosystem.
Yeah. At the beginning.
Absolutely.
Even though there was a bit of people were not happy that the officials didn't come out on time, and they were there already. But eventually, the process went
picked up.
Yeah,
and we saw the exercise take off very nicely. But unfortunately, in some areas, especially in some parts of Kogi, well, let's show you some of the instance that this Iluofa earlier in the day, Iluofa in Kogi State.
Them scampering for safety. I mean, these are people
who were gunshot heard in the distance.
And it's amazing because our correspondent said it was all going well. They were on the queue.
All of a sudden,
masked men appeared from nowhere. And, you begin to wonder, with this heavy deployment, I continue to talk about it, over 36,000. And you wonder where they were when all these people showed up and then made away with all the materials and everything. How did they get away from this kind of place with the
fact that even the borders through the states are cordoned off, are blocked for entrance and exits into the state. At 6 a.m., there were no movement in and out of the state. So you wonder what is.
And then later on, we began to see visuals of security forces patrolling the streets. But this is afterwards. So you begin to wonder, where was that patrol when this was happening?
Aside Iluofa, there is also incidents in Yetoro and some parts of Lokoja in Ajayi Crowder. Some of the instances.
That was a very big unit, actually, Ajayi Crowder. We're happy.
It's probably one of the biggest. Yeah. So, but I think we should go live to the field and hear from one of our correspondents in Kogi State, who was...
That's Kayla Megwa, that is.
Kayla Megwa. We will get to Kayla in a moment, but perhaps we should get our panelists on the show introduced. We have from our Abuja studio, of course, we'll be hearing from him much more on what has happened today, how his men and his colleagues at conducted themselves and what happened. We have the first PRO of Nigerian Police Force, Mr. Frank Umba. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Also with him is the Chief Press Secretary to the INEC Chairman, Mr. Rotimi Oyekomi, and also a lawyer there and the Director of African Center for Parliamentary and Constitutional Studies, Mr. Emmanuel Ayegbonam. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much. And I think I'd like to start off with DCP Umba there, simply because I know it's a busy day for you and you probably have to rush off. So let me just put this one in. Yes, not everywhere was shall I say, violence-free. But I wanted to take a little bit of something that you had said, to us. And you said you did a detailed security threat analysis. And that analysis helped you to have an intelligence-driven deployment of all the forces and all the men. What went wrong today, Mr. Umba? What went wrong today, Mr. Umba?
Okay, thank you for the privilege of being here. Yes, I stand by what I've said. We actually carried out a very detailed security threat analysis. And it was on the basis of those threat analysis that we configured and keep reconfiguring our deployments. And what you see today is actually a result of so much hard work that men and women of the Nigerian Police Force and other security agencies have put in place. If we tell you the level of threat that we detected when we carried out the threat analysis, and if we tell you the amount of work that went into identifying, isolating, and neutralizing a lot of this stress before today, you will appreciate the enormity of the challenges and the enormity of the accomplishments of members of the security agencies. And so for me, the fact that there are a few incidents of some isolated cases of violence do not in any way distract from the heavy investment and the amount of work we've done. Let's look at Kogi, for example. Kogi is a state with 21 local government areas, 239 wards, and a little over 2,500 polling units. If, as a result of the work we did in collaboration with INEC, in collaboration with our brothers and sisters from other agencies, we're able to have out of the 239 wards, or out of the over 2,500 polling units, we're able to secure 90% of them without incident. I think we have done substantially and significantly well.
Okay, Mr. Umba, I will come back to you on that because
the brand of politics.
Yes, I will come back to you on it because my actual question around where I'm driving at is how they were able to breach and, where the security forces you deployed were. Yes, you did deploy, but I will come back to you on that, Kogi, but we need to go live to our correspondent, Kayla Megwa. She's standing by there for us. So, Kayla, just tell us what's happening now, where you are, and how far you've gone with the process that you're monitoring. Kayla.
Hi. Okay, so it's been a very disappointing day for us here in Kogi State. It started off really nicely. We were at the Crowther Grammar School. It was very well. The materials came in early, but the security operatives didn't come in early, so it delayed the deployment of materials. That was how it started, and we thought that was going to be a bigger problem because that would affect, how when the elections were supposed to end. We're supposed to end at 2. We're thinking, was there going to be an extension? So that was where we were in the beginning, and then the election started. Of course, you know, 4 of us are here in Lokoja, in Kogi State. I was in Lokoja, and we decided, you know, we're going to go around the state to see how it's working out. In Lokoja, it seemed all nice in the morning. We took strolls around, went to polling units, saw people exercising their franchise, and we felt, okay, so maybe this was going to be a very good outing. Not too long into the afternoon. A very disappointing situation happened, especially at the Crowther Grammar School. We actually saw thugs coming in. They were shooting in the air. We had to take cover. You know, everyone scampered for safety. It was a very disappointing situation. A lot of cars, a lot of gunshots. I was hiding for about 6 minutes before we were able to come out and assess the damage that had been done. And by the time we came out from hiding, we found out that a lot of the election materials, in fact, all of them were gone. Not a lot of them. Everything was taken away. We even spoke to a few people whose phones were also taken. A few people who were crying because their valuables had been stolen as well in the ruckus. So that happened at the Crowther Grammar School. And while we're busy trying to recover for that, we found out that it was happening in other places as well. And of course, you know, Kogi State, you know, has been known to have violent elections here and there. We're hoping that this was going to be a different outing, to be honest, but it wasn't. It was a very disappointing situation in many parts of the state. That's not to say it was everywhere. There were parts of the state where elections went on safely, and some people were actually even commending everyone who's a stakeholder in this election process for making the elections a free, fair, and credible one in their respective areas. The violence hasn't ended, I can tell you that for sure. Our correspondent Pius Angbo had to turn back the highway leading from Lokoja to Ayangba, I think that's the name of that place. But the highway leading from Lokoja to Ajaokuta and that whole area, he had to turn back. A lot of cars had to turn back because there was a riot in those areas this evening. We have those visuals, though. You'll probably be seeing it much later. People hiding in the bushes. Our correspondent actually had to hide in the bushes as well with security operatives, and you know, it was a very disappointing situation this evening. So it hasn't ended, and everyone's on pins and needles right now. That's the mood in Kogi State. We're watching to see what's happening. Now, earlier today as well, when we came back from the Crowther Grammar School, civil society organizations had a lot to say about the situation. We're listening to Yaga Africa. They were talking earlier about you know, how some observers were being harassed in some particular centers and how it wasn't free, fair, and credible. They were asking for cancellation of elections in places where these violent acts occurred. And I hear we have someone from civil society who's going to be talking to us shortly about what her experiences are, some things that she saw, and what you know, what they would be asking for going forward. We have Mrs. Idaya here with us. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.
Just so you can talk to us a bit about the situation today in Kogi State.
I think the election started on a good note, but I think what this election has taught us again is that election is a stakeholders' affair. It's no longer about the early arrival or not of materials, but it's the level of violence, orchestrated violence that is being witnessed in these elections. I think this is one of the I don't even know how to put it, because I lack words myself as somebody who has been observing election, not just in Nigeria, but on the continent. It's very, very worrisome. It raises the question of what democracy really is exactly. Right now, there are ongoing violence. There has been harassment of observers. There has been destruction of electoral materials. There has been open shooting and cutting away of electoral materials in several polling units. It's uncalled for, and I think it's the worst thing to happen, especially after the 2019 elections. Rather than raising the bar on what we witnessed in the 2019 elections, this election has further lowered the bar and is raising questions on the 20 years of democracy we are celebrating this year.
Your group, just tell us about the experiences that your group had today observing the elections.
I think it's been a mixed bag. In some places where we visited, what's the name of the group? Center for Democracy and Development, CDD. I think it's been a mixed bag. At the beginning of the process, we were at places that were peaceful. People turned out in large numbers to vote. There were electoral materials in several of those places. At least by 8, 9, we could say over 50% of the polling units were actually opened. And
just to add the fact that there was a large turnout, which was different.
Yeah. Very, very large turnout. Ganaja, I was in Ganaja, I was in Ajaokuta, I was in several places. Very huge turnout of people ready to vote. Even we had instances of men and women queuing separately in large numbers, old people as old as 80 years ready to vote. But rather than allow the will of the people to actually prevail, we had some thugs, political thugs, randomly come in glare daylight, cutting away materials, shooting. In some instances, we even had people forcing people to vote along a certain line. I think it's uncalled for. I think it's unexpected. And I think that it's not even allowing us to actually look at the process. It's already delegitimized the outcome of the elections.
Let's talk a bit about some of the issues that were raised by some civil society organizations. Like I said earlier, Yaga Africa held a press conference immediately after the situation, the first wave of attacks. One of the questions that they brought up was the issue of vote buying. Could you talk to us about that?
I think vote buying was rampant, as at yesterday the CDD had already issued a statement talking about financial inducement of voters and even electoral officials. And this is what we saw. In fact, all across Lokoja, there were vote buying. From yesterday, Ankara rice, money were being distributed, and the price of a vote ranges from 500 naira to 6,000 naira in these elections, because we had places in Olamaboro that they paid as much as 6,000 naira to buy a vote. In fact, I witnessed several instances of sign language. We even had instances of the police themselves watching while they sell the vote. The whole issue about EFCC, ICPC coming in to help and assist in reducing this obviously had no effect.
That brings us to another issue that you just raised, which is the fact that most of these things were happening while security operatives were present. Did you witness that? The violence and, of course, the vote buying?
Yes. The violence, the cutting away of electoral materials. We even had instances where the policemen themselves have to scamper for safety. So I think it's one that it's orchestrated. I'm very surprised that in many of the polling units I personally visited, I saw policemen within the precinct unarmed, but outside some of it, where we expect to have patrols of the over 35,000 police people who have been deployed with arms and ammunition trying to guard it, we've not seen it. We've seen videos which we are also trying to fact check at the CDD, if genuine or not, where they were cutting away materials and they had a full escort cover of the special anti-terrorism squad also. I think it's quite worrisome. It only raises the question that election is not just about voters. It's not about the Independent National Electoral Commission conducting an elections. It has to do with the nature and character of the political parties themselves, the zero-sum game, and the security agents. After the 2019 elections, we all called in all our preliminary statements, even before the election day itself, that we expect to see the security agencies raise the bar and not be involved the way they were in the 2019.
We do have to let you go there now, but thank you so much, Idaya, for speaking with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
All right, so that's Idaya speaking on the situation here in Kogi State, and we're waiting to hear from INEC and other players as to what is the situation, what should be done going forward. Back to you.
Probably would have loved to ask Kela there what they are hearing from INEC, what the process is like with INEC, whether or not they are able to conclude this exercise at some polling unit. Kela, if you're still with us, if you can give us a sense of what INEC is telling you, if you have made contact with them.
I think we lost Kayla there.
Yeah.
Well, not lost in that sense, but
she's gone.
We'll try and get her back so that she can. The main thing we're actually looking at is how will that process conclude? And what the counting and all that is saying right
because
now.
I mean, if it's in the balance, there's a whole lot of trouble looming in terms of conclusion of the exercise.
I think he wanted the DSP in battle to respond.
Let me go back to Abuja studio with the spokesperson of the Nigerian Police Force, DCP Frank Kumba. You've put a lot of effort in these day and night of intelligence gathering and heavy deployments that you have had. In fact, you've been supported by other sister agencies in what you have done today. A lot of efforts you're putting there. But with the outcome of today, it does not look like it's pockets of violence. It looks so much like spread of violence. Perhaps some will say, quote, bag of violence. Are you disappointed in the outcome?
Let me, first of all, start by saying that the situation in Kogi has actually indeed been very challenging, more challenging than the situation in Bayelsa. The truth again, however, is the fact that we saw a great deal of this in the threat analysis we conducted earlier. And we actually took a lot of measured and strategic steps to actually isolate and neutralize some of these problems. However, when you are policing an environment where politicians play very desperate games, where politicians believe in winning at all costs, where politicians do not believe in the rule of law or in due process, constantly you will be swimming against the tide. And of course, you understand that as police officers, we can never behave like thugs. Inasmuch as we are armed, we believe first and foremost that our weapons are given to us by the state to preserve our citizens. And so, even when we are responding to incidents at the police stations, we are conscious of the fact that we need to exercise maximum restraint. We need to exercise a lot of due care and diligence to ensure that in trying to stop the thugs, in trying to stop the lawbreakers, we do not bring the innocent into harm's way. The policemen who are in Bayelsa, as well as the policemen and other security agencies in Kogi, are armed. They've got weapons, they've got loads of tear gas, but they are conscious of the fact that they needed to protect the citizens. They needed to use those weapons within the ambit of the law and exercise due care and attention so that we don't hurt our own people that we are paid, trained, and kitted to actually protect. So these are some of the restraints. But like I've said before, if you are policing an election and you are able to deliver significantly across the geographical area where where the election is taking place, you would have been considered to have done excellently well. But I admit the fact that there are indeed challenges in Kogi. As a matter of fact, as I speak to you, as at the last count, 22 persons have been arrested. A vehicle that was used by some of the thugs to attempt to commit some violence in some areas was impounded. About 7 different types of weapons recovered. And of course, we've also recovered a cache of live ammunition, both AK-47 live ammunition as well as live cartridges for the usual pump actions. The persons that have been taken into custody are currently helping us in investigation, and we will continue to follow up on those cases.
Okay, DCP, but I know it's as though we're just coming to you alone. We will get to the role of INEC and our legal practitioner who is in the studio there. But I just want you to give us a bit of clarity on the death toll that we're hearing coming out of Kogi today. We understand that there were 3 deaths, and a correspondent actually did escort some of the family members to the home of one of them. Could you just give us some clarity on the death toll that we hear coming out of Kogi?
The standard practice for law enforcement agents all over the world is that you don't speak about death toll until you have actually confirmed and reconfirmed. And so I won't be able to speak about their toll, unlike our colleagues in other professions who can actually speculate or estimate casualty figures by our own very calling and our professional standards. We are not allowed to speculate on number of persons that died in an incident. So we will come back to you as soon as we can empirically confirm the figures, and if any, we will get back to you, and we will responsibly do so.
Well, Mr. Mba, I'll still come back to you. Apologies to our other guests. We'll come to you because we understand that Mr. Mba may leave at some point. But if you look at the deployments made by the Nigerian police, about 36,000 police officers, the IG said were deployed. And you look at the number of polling units in Kogi State, for example, it's about 2,600. So it tells you that an average of 10 police officers are on the ground per polling unit. If you look at what has happened, the kind of ammunition that you said you have recovered, and considering also the policy that you made of how you shut the borders to the state at 6 a.m., where do you think that these ammunitions were coming in? Are they already on the ground?
Okay, let me first of all try to make some clarifications on the deployment figures that you issued out. Again, anybody can pick up his calculator and do these calculations and come up with the ratio that you've just dished out. But you should understand that this figure covers both the drivers, it covers the men in the signal department, it covers the engineers that are working around the clock to make sure that our signals don't go down during important national assignment and operations of this magnitude. It covers the marine engineers who are also taking care of the boats, like particularly in Bayelsa and in some parts of the riverine areas in Kogi. It also covers the undercover operatives. It covers the few operatives handling our helicopters, the pilots, the engineers, and a whole lot of other persons, the persons in the control room, and a lot of other operatives that are not usually seen on the front line. So when we give our figures, I also want people to understand that it does not just represent the persons that are detailed to monitor the police stations, the police centers, and the collection centers alone. And so that's what having said that, the issue of illicit arms and ammunition, you understand we've spoken about this repeatedly. So many subject matter experts have spoken about the proliferation of light weapons, not just in Nigeria, but also across Africa and so many other developing countries. And so in the build-up to these elections, we did take initiatives to try to mop up some of these illicit weapons. But as hard as we might have tried, I do not believe that we'll be able to mop up every single illicit weapon within those areas where the elections are currently taking place.
That full stop gives us a very good opportunity to take a breather, Mr. Mba. We will come to you in a moment. It does look like security takes our attention at this moment. It's very important. The conduct also takes our attention because we need to look at what INEC did right and perhaps what went wrong. We'll take a breather. Myself, my colleague Ijoma Onyato, still on the program. We'll be back with our panelists to discuss more on the program. Don't go away. We'll be right back.